Good Tuesday to you pre-cal students. Hope you guys are doing well. Please understand, even though you're listening to this video on Tuesday, I made this video on Saturday about 3 days ago. And so while I'm making this video, you have not came to my house yet, even though yesterday on Monday you did. In real time, this video is being made on Saturday. And so you have not yet been to my house, and so I cannot comment on this video how you did on the tests that you took on Monday. In fact, I'm not sure how many of you are going to even take the test on Monday. That'll totally be your decision. So, welcome to class on Tuesday. I hope you guys did well on your test on Monday, and I will get that information to you as soon as I can. Grab your notebooks. Again, I try to go through these videos as quickly as possible. We are going to be applying the mathematics and doing word problems from each chapter. I know you will not look forward to that, but it's very important that we do that. Also, be thankful we're still going through the review chapter, because when we finish this review chapter and we hit the trigonometry chapters, which again, I've told you before, I forget the exact numbers, chapters 5, 6, and 7, or whatever it might be, chapters, 5, 6, and 7, you're going to wish that you were back in the review chapter, because that material is going to be very challenging and it will be very good for you. Okay, so if you're a little bored, do understand the material will get much more difficult. Okay, with all of that rambling said, hope you had a good weekend, hope the test went well for you yesterday. And let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and copy this heading down. We're going to be looking at today multiplying and dividing rational expressions, lesson chapter R, section 5. Let me grab a drink of water here real quick while you're copying that down. And so far we have learned how to find the domains of rational expressions, and we have learned how to simplify rational expressions. Tomorrow on Wednesday we're going to learn how to add and subtract rational expressions. You will find that very difficult. You will be challenged. Today's lesson is pretty simple. Alright, I am going to go fast, so you'll probably have to pause the video as you write these steps down, but that's fine. Here we go. When it comes to multiplying and dividing rational expressions, there are 4 steps that we're going to use, okay? And again, do understand you will need to pause the video. Step 1, you want to factor as many numerators and denominators as possible of all of the fractions. So you go through each fraction, numerators and denominators, and you factor as many as possible. Step 2, if you're dividing, don't forget to flip the fraction that is the divisor and then multiply. For example, if I have 1/2 divided by 3/4, the second fraction is my divisor. You should have learned a long time ago that you flip the second fraction and you then multiply. And that's what I'm referring to in step 2 here. Don't forget, if you're dividing, you've got to flip the fraction, the second fraction, we call it the divisor, and then multiply. Okay, moving on to step 3, cross cancel as much as possible. By the way, that's why you factored up here in step 1. That's why you factored, so that you could then cross cancel as much as possible and reduce each fraction as much as possible. And then lastly, step 4, finish, and that's supposed to be by. I'm not sure why that says my. Let me fix that right now while I have the chance. There we go. Thanks for your patience on that. Step 4, finish by multiplying. All right. So this will not be a long video today, and you actually don't have a lot of homework either, so going a little easy on you today. No particular reason, it's just how the math fell. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we will definitely compensate for that. Wednesday's math is really going to be a challenge for you, okay? All right, let's go ahead and look at 3 examples today. 1, 2, and 3, and that'll be it for the notes today. And then you'll have 7 problems to work on in your homework tonight. Okay, this is problem number 1. Please copy this in your notes. I want us to multiply these 2 rational expressions. Now, if you've copied down your steps like I asked you to, you know that step 1 says to factor as much as you can. Well, I cannot factor x plus 4. It's a binomial. I do not know the square root or the cubed root of any of those two terms. I cannot factor this binomial. I do not know the square root or the cube root of either one of those two terms. However, I'm going to go ahead and bring that down. X plus 4, x minus 3. However, I can factor this, okay? I do know the square root of x squared, and I do know the square root of 9, and the first term is positive, the second term is negative. I'm dealing with perfect squares. The square root of x squared is x, so I put an x here and here. The square root of 9 is 3. Make one positive, make one negative. So there's that factorization. So I'm going to come down here, and for the top, I'm going to put x plus 3, x minus 3. Now let's look at your denominator. All right, x squared minus x minus 2. Now let's see if we can factor this. I have a trinomial with a lead coefficient of 1, so I would list out all the multiples of negative 2. Well, let's see what we can come up with here. If I had a negative 2 times a positive 1, if I multiplied those two, I would get a negative 2. And if I combined those two, I would get a negative 1, which is my middle term. So my factorization would be x minus 2, x plus 1. X minus 2, x plus 1. We'll write that right down here. X minus 2, x plus 1. Now, step 2 says, if you're dividing, be sure and flip the second fraction. We're not dividing. Step 3 says, cross cancel and reduce as much as possible. Well, remember back in the old days when you had something like 1/2 times 4/5, you could cross cancel. 2 goes into 2 once and 2 goes into 4 twice. Hopefully you know that. That's pretty, not to be mean, but that's pretty elementary math. And so you can cross cancel. So you have an x minus 3 and an x minus 3. So you're more than welcome to cross those off. Also, step 3 says to reduce your fractions. In other words, see this x plus 3 right here? If I also had an x plus 3 right here, which I don't, but if I did, I could reduce this fraction by crossing those off also. So be sure and look for situations like that. Unfortunately, I don't have that, and so there's no more canceling to do. There's no more reducing to do. So now step 4 says finish by multiplying. So I have x plus 4, and you do want to put parentheses around it, times x plus 3. And then here we just have a 1, so 1 times this whole denominator here would be x minus 2, x plus 1. Not too bad, students. I mean, if you've really mastered your factoring, and if you're getting pretty fast at it now, and you can figure out how to reduce and cross cancel, these problems are not difficult. They are not difficult. Okay, moving on to number 2 in your notes. Let's go ahead and divide this rational expression. Now, first of all, I can factor y cubed minus 1. I'm going to work on it right down here. Y cubed minus 1. I do know the cube root of this term, and I do know the cube root of this term. It's a binomial, so I'm dealing with perfect cubes, so I put a little parentheses and a big parentheses. The cube root of y cubed is y. The cube root of 1 is 1. Bring down your minus sign. You take this term and you square it. It goes here. You take the y and the 1, you multiply them together, and that's y. And then you square this term, which is 1. And then whenever this sign is negative here, everything over here is positive. So there. I factored this numerator. So let me go ahead and put my bar here. And I have y minus 1. And then in the other parentheses, y squared plus y plus 1. So there we go. Go ahead and erase this. And let's move on. Now, I'm going to take my denominator right here. I'm going to try to anyways, hopefully not get too fancy. There we go. And we're going to pull that right here. And now we're going to factor that, okay? I do know the square root of y squared. I do know the square root of 1, so I'm dealing with perfect squares. When dealing with perfect squares, the first term must be positive, the second term must be negative, and I have that. So I'm going to put 2 little parentheses. So the square root of y squared would be y. The square root of 1 would be 1. and you make one positive, and you make one negative. All right, not too bad. So now I've factored my denominator. Pull that right over here, and we'll go ahead and put this back up here. Now, let's go ahead and factor this numerator here. So let's pull it down here. Let's see if we can factor this. Trinomial, lead coefficient of 1. So I'm going to list out the factors of 1. I need two numbers that are multiplied together would give me 1. One added together would give me a positive 1. I don't think that's factorable. Now listen to me, students. I can't think of any numbers that when you multiply them together you get 1, and when you add them together you also get a positive 1. I think of 1 times 1, positive times a positive, but when you add those you do not get a positive 1. This is not factorable, so that happens sometimes, no big deal. This trinomial is not factorable, so we'll put it back up here. Now let's see if this trinomial here is factorable. And I think this one will be. All right, I have a trinomial, can't pull anything out that's common. I have a lead coefficient of 1, so I list out the multiples of 1, and those factors of 1, the factors have to add up to positive 2. I think we're dealing with positive 1 and positive 1, because 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. So the factorization should be y plus 1, y plus 1. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down my division bar, and then my denominator has now become this. I factored it, and we'll move this right back up here. And now remember, students, how I could not factor this numerator? Well, if I couldn't factor it, I'm just going to bring it down here. All right. Now let's see if we can. Oh, I was getting ready to start canceling, but hold it. Look what I've got here. I've got a fraction. I've got fractions that are dividing, so I've got to flip this second fraction. All right. So first of all, I'm going to make this a multiplication. So now I'm multiplying, not dividing. So there we go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, move it down here, take this, move it up here, and then take this and move it here. So there, I flipped the fractions. So step 1, factor everything as much as possible. Step 2, flip a fraction. If you're dividing, we did that. Now step 3, you can cross cancel. For example, see this y plus 1 right here? I'm going to use red so it stands out. This y plus 1 cancels with this y plus 1. Hey, look at this. This is a whole trinomial. Y squared plus y plus 1. Look at this whole trinomial. Y squared plus y plus 1. So that whole trinomial left with the 1 here. Everything's gone. Cancels with this. And look at this. Remember how I told you can cross cancel diagonally, but also you can reduce fractions. You can go up and down within the same fraction. So y minus 1 here would cancel with y minus 1. So I'm left with nothing but a 1 here, everything's gone. Nothing but a 1 here, everything's gone. Nothing but a 1 here, everything's gone. So 1 times y plus 1 would simply be y plus 1. And 1 times 1 would simply be 1. So you're more than welcome to put y plus 1 over 1 for your answer, or just simply y plus 1. That's up to you. All right. And now the last problem, I want to warn you, this is probably not a fair problem. This is going to be really, really, really hard to understand, but just take notes, sit back and enjoy it, and understand if I were to give you any of these types on a quiz or a test, I would not give you a lot of them, probably just one or maybe none. But this is a really, really deep, good thinking problem for you guys. Okay, step 1 says to factor the numerators and the denominators as far as you possibly can. Now let's start over here and just be really and take care of the obvious things first. Look, this was a trinomial you cannot factor. I mean, there's no way. There's no, you've got an A and a B and a 3, nothing common you can pull out. There's nothing you can multiply that would give you -3. When add together, give you 1. Same thing here with this trinomial. You can't factor this trinomial. So this cannot be factored, and this cannot be factored. Now, at first glance, when you see these right here, you might be thinking, wow, this is really weird. But can I ask you a question? If you had x squared minus 9, This is going to be really hard to understand, so some of you will see it and some of you won't, but watch this. If you had x squared minus 9, the square root of x squared is just x and x. In other words, like crossing off that 2, right? And the square root of 9 is 3 and 3. Make one positive, make one negative. Well, this is going to be really difficult to see, but do you see this top numerator here? Please watch this. Do you see how you have a plus b squared? Look, if you had x squared, if you had x squared minus 9, you would just put parentheses, and you would put an x here and an x here, right? Well, it's the same thing, only instead of having x, you have a plus b. So I do know the square root of a plus b squared, and I do know the square root of 9. So I'm going to put a parentheses and a parentheses. I'll think about it. If I had x squared right here, I would just simply put an x here and an x here. It's like I crossed off the 2 and put an x into x. Hopefully you're seeing this. Okay, again, some of you will and some of you won't. Well, look, do the same thing here. I have a plus b squared, so the square root of a plus b squared would be a plus b, a plus b. And the square root of 9 would be 3. So we put a 3 here and a 3 here, make one positive, make one negative. Now that might be really confusing to you, but that's a really cool deep thinking problem, and that works. You can factor this numerator right here down to this right here. Now that's pretty cool. Do you see the denominator here? Maybe if you grasped that pretty well, maybe you got to try this one on your own. It's done almost the exact same way. Look, if I had x squared minus 9, I would just put parentheses and put an x here and an x here. It's like I crossed off the 2 and just put an x and an x. Well, it's the same thing here now. Exact same thing. I've got a minus b squared, so I know the square root of a minus b squared, and I know the square root of 9. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 2 parentheses. And look, well, we know the square root of 9, that's easy, 3. So I put a 3 and a 3. The square root of a minus b squared is a minus b, a minus b. Then don't forget to make one positive and make one negative. So there we go, we did it. We factored this right here that I'm moving. We factored this denominator down to this denominator here. I think that's really cool factoring. All right. Now, we already said we can't factor any of this entire fraction right here. So we're just going to bring this whole fraction down. Go ahead and put a multiplication sign. So step 1 said factor all the numerators and denominators as much as you possibly can. We've done that. Step 2 says don't forget to flip any fractions. You need to flip when you're dividing. We're not dividing. Step 3 says start cross canceling. So here we go. Let's see, I've got an a plus b plus 3 down here and an a plus b plus 3 up here. So I'm going to cross that off, cross that off. I have an a minus b minus 3 up here and an a minus b minus 3 right here. And that's it. We cannot reduce these because they're not identical. If there was a plus sign here, if this was a minus sign here, then they would match. We could cross them off, okay? But that is not the case. They do not match. And so here's what we're going to do. There's nothing left here, so it's really a 1. Nothing left here, so it's really a 1. So you have a plus b minus 3 times 1. That would simply be a plus b minus 3. And then we have a minus b plus 3 times 1. And that would be a minus b plus 3. Please don't try to cross things off. You have 3 terms in the top and 3 terms in the bottom. So you cannot just start canceling things out like that. You cannot do that. Okay, not a long video. Again, I'm not trying to go easy on you guys. It's just we're breaking things down into what needs to be learned, and this is a good daily lesson. Tomorrow we'll get into adding and subtracting rational expressions, and then we're going to start covering reviewing linear equations on Thursday, and then quadratic equations on Friday. And that's it. We are done with the review chapter, and so next week we really start hitting the trig pretty hard. So I know I can hear the cheers coming from your houses. You guys are so excited about that. Okay, here's your homework. Please get started on this. There's the help video to watch if you need to. Hope you guys have a great Tuesday, and I will talk to you on Wednesday.